I never should have gone inside that house. It was a dare, that's all it was. Stupid, reckless, but harmless. Or at least that's what we told ourselves. Just another urban legend, just another abandoned house on the outskirts of town. The kind you drive past with the windows up. The kind that makes your skin crawl for no reason you can explain. It was me, Derek, and Olivia. We were drunk, reckless, and bored. The perfect combination for making bad decisions. The house had been empty for decades, but the stories never faded. People said it was cursed, that something still lived inside. That if you went in and stood in front of the hallway mirror, you'd see something standing behind you. Something that wasn't you. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. None of us did. Until we stepped inside. The air was wrong the moment we crossed the threshold. Thick, stale, like the house had been holding its breath for years, waiting for someone to wake it up. Our flashlights cast long, shaky beams across the dust-covered floorboards. Every step we took sent up little clouds like the house was exhaling around us. "Let's get this over with," Olivia muttered, hugging herself against the cold. Derek led the way, laughing, pretending he wasn't scared. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all felt it, like we weren't alone. The mirror was at the end of the hallway, cracked and smeared with years of grime. It stood taller than any of us, its frame warped and splintered with age. We lined up in front of it, our reflections distorted, faces stretching and twisting in the uneven glass. "Say the words." Derek grinned, nudging me. "Come on, man, prove you're not a coward." I swallowed. My mouth was dry. I forced a laugh, raised my chin, and spoke. "Show us who you really are." The silence that followed was suffocating. For a long moment, nothing happened. Our reflections stared back, wavering in the weak light. Then Olivia gasped. My stomach dropped. She wasn't looking at herself anymore. She was looking at me, no, at the thing behind me. I turned too fast, my flashlight swinging wildly. Nothing. Just darkness stretching behind us, the hallway yawning into black. But when I looked back at the mirror, I saw it. Not my reflection. Not Derek's. Not Olivia's. Something else. Something wrong. It stood just behind us, tall and leaning in, its face obscured by a twisting shadow, as if the glass itself was rejecting it. And then, it smiled. I heard Olivia scream. Derek stumbled, backward, knocking into me, sending us both sprawling to the floor. The flashlight hit the ground, spinning wildly, throwing frantic shadows across the walls. Footsteps, fast, too fast, coming toward us. The last thing I saw before the flashlight flickered out was the reflection stepping forward. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember running. All I know is that 1 second I was on the floor staring at that thing stepping out of the mirror, its body stretching wrong, twisting like it was unfolding from another world. And the next I was sprinting. Olivia's screams echoed through the house, her footsteps pounding behind me. Derek was ahead, barreling toward the front door, his flashlight swinging wildly. But the door, it was closed. I knew we had left it open. I knew it. Derek grabbed the handle and yanked. Nothing. The wood groaned, the hinges rattled. But it wouldn't move. Olivia sobbed. "Oh my God, oh my God." Then the lights went out. Total darkness, and in that darkness, it breathed, not behind us, not down the hall, right between us, slow, wet, too close. I turned, shaking, my hand fumbling for the flashlight. My fingers found the switch, I clicked it on, and there it was, not human, not anymore. It had been in the mirror too long. Its limbs were too long, its fingers tapering into jagged points. Its face not a face, just a shifting void, a gaping, toothless smile stretching across the black mass where features should be. It moved without moving. its body jerking forward in unnatural, fragmented motions like a broken puppet on invisible strings. And then, it spoke. Not in words. In echoes. In a warped, garbled imitation of our own voices, layered on top of each other, overlapping, twisting. Show us who you really are. The words we had spoken to the mirror. But this time, it wasn't a dare. It was a command. Derek screamed. His flashlight dropped, clattering against the floor. I grabbed Olivia's wrist, my body on fire with panic, and then it touched me. Cold. Deep, bone deep, soul deep cold. My vision blurred, my breath hitched, my legs locked. I felt my skin tighten, my own body rejecting me, my mind slipping. I saw something. A reflection, but it wasn't mine. It was me, but not me. A hollow version. Eyes vacant, mouth stretched wide in a soundless scream. Something reaching from inside the glass, pulling at my insides, unraveling me thread by thread. I was being taken. I don't know how Olivia did it. I don't know if she even realized what she was doing. But she screamed my name, and somehow that was enough. The grip broke. My mind snapped back into place. I gasped, stumbling forward, my vision tunneling. Derek was slamming himself against the door, once, twice. On the third hit, it burst open. We tumbled outside, crashing onto the overgrown grass, panting, shaking, sobbing. The house groaned behind us. The door swung shut on its own. And then, silence. No wind, no footsteps, no whispering breaths. It was over. At least that's what we told ourselves. We never spoke about that night. We swore we wouldn't. But things changed after that. Derek stopped sleeping. Olivia moved away. And me, I can't look at mirrors anymore, because sometimes out of the corner of my eye I see something looking back and it's still smiling. I shouldn't be alive. That thought keeps looping in my head as I sit here trembling, the cold air cutting into my skin like needles. My body is still covered in dirt, my clothes soaked in sweat. I can't stop shaking. Not from the cold, but from the terror. I need to tell you what happened. We thought it would be just another camping trip. A weekend getaway deep in the Blackwater National Forest. An isolated stretch of dense woodland in Montana, miles away from any town, no cell service, no roads, just towering pines and the eerie silence of untouched nature. Me, Jake, Eric, and Olivia. 4 lifelong friends. We had done this before, but this time was different. It started with the whistling. The first night after setting up camp near a small clearing, we sat around the fire drinking and laughing. The flames crackled, casting long shadows across the trees. That's when we heard it. Faint, distant, almost like a bird call, a whistle. 3 short notes. We went silent. "Did you hear that?" Olivia whispered, her fingers tightening around her cup. "Probably just the wind." Eric shrugged, forcing a laugh. But the wind doesn't whistle back. Seconds later, the same 3-note melody echoed through the trees, this time closer. Jake stood up, scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. "Hello?" he called out. Stupid, so stupid. Silence. Then, snap. A branch breaking in the distance. None of us moved. The fire flickered, our shadows twisting on the trees like distorted figures. A horrible feeling crawled up my spine. Something was watching us. Eric, always the tough guy, grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. The beam cut through the trees, illuminating nothing but endless black. We should have left. We should have run. Instead, We did what every dumb group of friends does in horror stories. We laughed it off. It's probably just some hiker messing with us, Jake said. Relax. So we ignored it. We continued drinking, talking, pretending. But the forest didn't forget us. That night, in my tent, I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside made my breath hitch. The rustling leaves, the wind, the occasional snap of twigs. But then, the zipper of our tent moved. Slow. Deliberate. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. Olivia, sleeping beside me, didn't stir. I wanted to scream, to grab the knife from my bag. But before I could even breathe, it stopped. Silence. I lay there, wide-eyed, staring at the thin fabric of the tent. For the longest time, nothing happened. And then, the whistle. Right outside. 3 notes. Soft. Playful. I squeezed my eyes shut. My fingers dug into the sleeping bag. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just prayed. Prayed that whatever was outside would go away. Eventually, exhaustion took me. I don't remember falling asleep. But when I woke up, the sun was rising. Olivia was still beside me. And for a moment I thought maybe I imagined it, until I unzipped the tent and saw the footprints. Not ours. They were fresh, deep in the dirt, circling our campsite. Bare feet. And whoever left them had been standing right outside my tent for a long, long time. I stood there staring at the footprints, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The dirt around my tent was disturbed, like someone had been pacing, waiting. My stomach twisted. I looked up at the others. Jake was rubbing his eyes, stretching. Eric was making coffee over the fire. No one else had seen them. Guys. My voice came out hoarse. Someone was here last night. Olivia knelt beside me, her face pale as she traced the prints with her fingers. Bare feet, long toes, deep imprints. The kind that suggested someone had been standing completely still. Watching. Then Jake laughed. Laughed. Dude, you're freaking yourself out. He took a sip of coffee, unconcerned. Maybe it was one of us taking a piss. Eric glanced at the tracks. Yeah, or some lost hiker passing through. No, I knew what I heard. The tent zipper. The whistle. No normal hiker stands outside a stranger's tent in the middle of the night, but they wouldn't listen. By noon, the footprints were gone, trampled over by our own steps. The eerie feeling never left me, though. Every time the wind shifted the leaves, I tensed. Every distant sound made my pulse jump. I wanted to leave. That night we built the fire bigger. The glow stretched further into the darkness. But it didn't stop the feeling, that sickening sensation of being watched. And then, around midnight, it happened again. The whistle. 3 notes. Soft. Mocking. We all heard it this time. Olivia's face went white. Eric muttered something under his breath. Jake grabbed his flashlight. All right, I'm done with this shit. Before I could stop him, he was marching into the trees. The light bobbed in the distance. Then a scream, sharp, gut-wrenching. We ran. We found him standing in the middle of a small clearing, shaking. The flashlight pointed at something on the ground. A deer's head, cleanly severed. Its eyes were missing. The mouth stretched wide, like it had been forced into a grin. The worst part? The flies hadn't even touched it yet. It was fresh. Jake dropped the flashlight. We need to go. We turned back, but the path was gone. The trees had changed. I know how that sounds. Impossible. But I swear to you, the trail we came from wasn't there anymore. No footprints. No broken branches. Just endless, suffocating blackness. The fire. was nowhere in sight. That's when the whistling started again, this time all around us. I don't remember running. I don't remember how long we screamed for each other, stumbling through the woods, our voices swallowed by the towering trees. But I remember the last thing I saw before everything went black. A figure. Standing between the trees. Too tall. Too thin. Naked, its skin pale as bone. Its head tilted unnaturally to the side. Watching. Smiling. Then, nothing. I woke up at dawn, alone, my body covered in dirt and scratches. No Jake, no Eric, no Olivia. I searched until my legs gave out, until my voice was hoarse from screaming their names. They were gone. When I finally stumbled out of the forest, when I finally reached a ranger station, nobody believed me. They searched. They found our abandoned campsite, our gear, the blood-stained flashlight, but no bodies, just the deer's head. They called it an accident, said my friends probably got lost. But I know the truth. Something took them, something that still lurks in Blackwater National Forest. And sometimes, at night, when the world is too quiet, I swear I can still hear it. That whistle, 3 notes, waiting. I should have listened to my gut. The second we set foot in Blackwood Forest, I felt it, a thick, suffocating dread, like the trees were leaning in too close, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. But I swallowed it down. We all did. After all, it was just a camping trip, right? It was me, Nate, and Ryan. Best friends since high school, always looking for the next thrill. Blackwood was the perfect spot. Miles away from town, no cell service, and a history of ghost stories that no one really took seriously. People go missing all the time in the woods, the old guy at the gas station had said before we got here. He spat tobacco into a rusted can, eyeing us like we were already dead. Some places just ain't meant to be found. We laughed it off. We were idiots. That first night the fire crackled, and we drank too much, trading bullshit stories about skinwalkers and ghosts. At some point, Ryan got up to take a leak and wandered past the tree line. When he didn't come back, we called his name. No answer. Probably trying to scare us, Nate muttered, rolling his eyes. But there was something off. The air felt wrong. Heavy. The way it does before a storm, but the sky was clear. Then we heard it. A crunch of leaves. "Ryan?" I called. Silence. Then a whisper. Soft. Broken. My name. Not Ryan's voice. Something primal kicked in. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the tree line. The beam flickered. My hands were shaking, then movement. Something tall. Too tall. Standing between the trees, just beyond the reach of the light. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there. Then a second whisper. Right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Nate's face was pale. "Dude, we need to go." And then, footsteps. Rushing toward us. Heavy. Fast. We ran. And that was the last time I saw Ryan alive. We ran like animals. The kind that know they're being hunted. The forest swallowed our screams. The sound of our footsteps swallowed by the damp earth. My lungs burned. My legs ached, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Because something was behind us, close enough that I could hear it breathing. A wet, rattling breath. Nate tripped. I heard his body hit the ground hard. "Nate!" I skidded to a stop, grabbed his arm, yanking him up. But he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were wide, locked onto something behind me. I turned, and there it was. Ryan. At least it looked like him. His clothes were the same. His face was the same. But his eyes... God. His eyes were wrong. like marbles soaked in ink. His mouth hung open, too wide, like his jaw had been unhinged. And his neck, tilted at an angle that no human neck should bend. Ryan? I barely recognized my own voice. He took a step forward. Something cracked inside him, like bones snapping into place. His lips curled up into a grotesque grin. Then he spoke. "Don't run." His voice was all wrong. Slurred, layered, like multiple voices speaking at once. My stomach lurched. I grabbed Nate and bolted. But the second we moved, the thing that looked like Ryan moved too. It didn't run. It glided. Branches tore at my skin. My vision blurred. Somewhere in the distance, I swore I heard something laughing, a deep, guttural noise that didn't belong to any human throat. I don't know how long. We ran. My legs went numb. My breath came in ragged gasps. And then, just when I thought we'd escaped, Nate screamed. I turned just in time to see him being pulled backward. Hands, too many hands, shot out from the darkness, wrapping around his arms, his legs, his throat. His eyes bulged as he clawed at them, choking on his own screams. I lunged for him. "Nate!" His face twisted in terror. "Don't." Then he was gone, yanked into the abyss between the trees, swallowed whole by the night. Silence. I stumbled back, shaking, my body screaming for air. I wanted to call out for him. I wanted to do something. But my mouth wouldn't work. My legs wouldn't move. And then, just beyond the trees, something stepped forward. Not Ryan. Not Nate. Something else. It stood tall, its limbs stretched too long, its skin dark and pulsing like it was barely holding its form together. It had no eyes, but I felt it looking at me. And then, it smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that split its face in half. I ran. I don't remember making it back to the road. I don't remember collapsing in front of a passing truck. All I remember is waking up in a hospital bed with an officer asking me questions I couldn't answer. Ryan and Nate were never found. The official report said accidental disappearance. The town moved on. But I didn't. Because some nights when I close my eyes, I hear it again. My name, whispered in a voice that doesn't belong to anyone alive. And sometimes when I turn off the lights, I see it. Smiling. Waiting. The first night I heard it breathing. I was alone, deep in the Cascade Mountains of Washington, miles away from the nearest town. That was the whole point. I needed space, silence, a break from the static of everyday life. No phone, no internet, just me, a tent, and the whispering pines. But the forest wasn't silent. That first night, as I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the nylon ceiling of my tent, I heard it, a slow, ragged inhale, then another. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was close. I held my breath, waiting. The sound stopped. The woods settled back into their natural rhythm. Crickets, rustling leaves, the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Maybe I imagined it. I told myself that over and over until exhaustion pulled me under. The second night, it got worse. I had built a fire and was finishing my last beer when I heard it again. This time it was followed by a snap. A branch breaking. Not far from my campsite, I turned, flashlight in hand, scanning the trees. Nothing, just the tall, swaying pines, their shadows stretching unnaturally long in the firelight. But the feeling was there, that suffocating wrongness, like something was watching, like something was waiting. I told myself it was just paranoia, too many horror movies, too much isolation. But then I saw them. Footprints. They hadn't been there before. A trail of them pressed deep into the damp earth leading from the tree line toward my tent. Bare feet. Long. Too long. My stomach knotted. I turned sharply, shining my flashlight in every direction. The forest loomed indifferent and endless, but I felt it. Something was out there. Someone had been here, and they were barefoot. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, gripping my knife, waiting for something to move. But nothing happened. No breathing, no footsteps, just silence, and then the third night came and I realized I was never alone. I should have left. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to pack up, to run, to never look back. But I stayed. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stupidity. Maybe some part of me needed to know what was out there. I wish I hadn't. The fire burned, low, flickering against the dark. My eyes were raw from exhaustion, my pulse a steady thud in my ears. But I stayed awake, watching, listening. Then I heard it. Crunch. My breath hitched. The sound was deliberate. Close, just beyond the firelight. Crunch. Slow, measured footsteps. Coming toward me. I gripped my flashlight with shaking hands and flicked it on, sweeping the trees. Nothing. Just darkness and the endless, towering pines. I swallowed hard. Who's there? My voice cracked. Silence. Then, it spoke. Not a voice. A mimicry. A broken, stuttering imitation of my own words. Who's there? But wrong. Distorted. Like a radio signal warping in and out. My skin turned to ice. The flashlight flickered, and then I saw it. At the edge of the trees, just beyond the light, something tall stood between the trunks. Too still. Too thin. Its head, tilted at an unnatural angle, its limbs hanging too long at its sides. It didn't move. It just watched. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Then it took a step forward. The light sputtered, dimming as if something was draining the life out of it. The fire, too, seemed weaker, its glow shrinking. It was coming closer. I forced my body to move, to run, but the moment I turned, it was behind me. I didn't hear it move, didn't feel the air shift, but I knew it was there. Close enough that I could feel its breath against my neck. I should have left. I bolted for my car. My legs burned, lungs heaving, but I ran. I could hear it behind me. Fast, too fast. My tent, my gear, everything blurred past me as I sprinted through the dark. Branches tore at my skin. My foot caught on a root and I slammed into the dirt. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs, but I didn't stop. I turned onto my back, scrambling, hands clawing at the ground. And it was there, towering over me. A shape of shifting shadows, its face wrong. No eyes, but I felt its gaze inside me. Its mouth stretched, but there were no lips, just a void, stretching too wide, as if it was learning how to smile. Then it whispered my name, not in my voice. Not in any voice, but in every voice, layered, distorted, familiar and unfamiliar at once. I scrambled backward, blind with terror, my fingers digging into the mud. My car, I could see it, just beyond the trees. I forced myself up, legs screaming, in protest, and ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I slammed into my car, yanked the door open, and threw myself inside. My hands fumbled with the keys, dropped them, cursed, grabbed them again. The engine roared to life. Headlights flooded the forest. Nothing. No movement. No footprints. Just my abandoned campsite. My overturned chair. The dying fire. But I knew, better, it was still there. Watching, waiting. I sped down that dirt road like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. I don't remember the drive back. I don't remember how I got home. But I remember the feeling. The weight of unseen eyes pressing into my skull. I haven't gone back. I don't camp anymore. I don't go near the woods. But sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet, I still hear it. That slow, ragged breath. Waiting. I should have never answered the knocking. It started at exactly 3:12 a.m. A slow, deliberate rhythm against my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. At first I thought I was dreaming. The sound was distant, almost woven into the fabric of sleep. But then it came again, louder, closer. Tap, tap, tap. I turned onto my side, my breath shallow. My bedroom was on the second floor. There shouldn't have been anything knocking. I lay there frozen, listening. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing against my chest. Then, another sound. Scratching. Long, deliberate drags of something sharp against the glass. I sat up too fast, my heart slamming against my ribs. My phone read 3:13 a.m. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the street lamp outside casting long skeletal shadows across the walls. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't look, but I did. At first, I didn't see anything, just my own reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed. But then, it moved. Not me. My reflection. It tilted its head at a sickening angle, its mouth stretching too wide, curling into something that was supposed to be a smile, and then it knocked again. From inside the glass. I screamed, scrambling backward, nearly falling out of bed. My pulse roared in my ears as I grabbed my phone, fumbling for the flashlight. My fingers were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. When the beam hit the window, nothing. Just my normal reflection, my own panicked face staring back. No smile. No movement, just me. For a long time I sat there gasping for breath, my body slick with cold sweat. My mind raced. Sleep paralysis? A dream? Stress? Then my phone vibrated. A text from my sister Ava. "Why are you outside?" My stomach dropped. I fumbled to type back. "What are you talking about?" "I'm in bed." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her response. "I just saw you, outside my window." She lived. 6 miles away and I hadn't left my room. Ava wasn't answering her phone. I called once, straight to voicemail, called again. Nothing. I couldn't breathe. My body felt like it was shutting down. My mind screaming at me to do something, but what the hell was I supposed to do? I jumped out of bed, grabbing my keys, barely registering that I was still in my pajamas. The house was silent as I bolted. Down the stairs, my heartbeat slamming in my ears. The front door felt miles away. Every shadow in the hallway stretched unnaturally, twisting toward me. I yanked the door open and stopped dead. Someone was standing at the end of my driveway. No, not someone. Me. I couldn't move, couldn't think. My doppelganger stood in the weak glow of the street lamp watching me. It wore my face, my body, my exact clothes. But something was wrong. The smile. It was too wide. It stretched past the limits of human anatomy, lips pulling back until they almost split the skin. The eyes were mine, but not. They shimmered, wet and black, swallowing the dim light. It raised one hand and waved. I stumbled back, slamming the door. My mind was unraveling, logic crumbling under the weight of what I had just seen. My phone vibrated again. Ava. I answered so fast I almost dropped it. "Ava, are you okay?" Her voice was small. "It's still outside." My stomach twisted. "What? What do you mean?" Her breath was ragged. "It won't stop knocking." Ava's house was 6 miles away, and I had just seen myself outside my house. Something Wasn't right, I didn't think. I just ran. The streets were empty, the night pressing in from all sides. My car was too slow, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The whole way there, my mind replayed the image of that thing standing outside my house, grinning like it knew me. By the time I reached Ava's house, the driveway was empty. No one outside. But she was still inside, crying. I pounded on the door. "Ava, it's me!" There was a pause. Then, slowly, the lock clicked. She opened the door just a crack. Her eyes were terrified. "Prove it," she whispered. I blinked. "What?" Her grip on the door tightened. "Prove it's really you?" I almost laughed, almost cried, but then I understood. I had seen myself outside my own house. Had she seen me too, or something pretending to be me? My throat went dry. I swallowed, taking a step back into the dim porch light. "It's me, Ava. I promise." She didn't move. Then her face changed. Something flickered in her expression, something hollow, cold. And then, she smiled, too wide. The door slammed shut. I started banging. "Ava, open the door, please." No answer. My phone buzzed. A text. From Ava. "Why are you still outside?" Cold spread through my body, freezing me to the spot. My hands were still on the door. But my phone said, "Why are you still outside?" I turned slowly. A figure stood at the end of the driveway. It looked just like me, and it was waving. Now that you've heard what no one should, remember, the terror doesn't end here. There are still many stories lurking in the dark, waiting to be told. So subscribe, leave a like, and share this video with your family. It helps me a lot to keep bringing you these chilling tales. And don't forget to check out the next video playing on the screen if you dare to face more nightmares.